So this video was recorded on Christmas Eve, but I do intend to upload it on Christmas Day. So if you're watching this video on Christmas Day, happy Christmas to everyone. I hope you have a good day. Thanks very much for tuning in. I wanted to talk about Anthony Joshua's next opponent, which is something that a lot of boxing fans in the UK are certainly very interested in. Now initially there was a lot of talk about Derek Chisora being the next opponent. Eddie Hearn said in a recent interview with IFL TV he wasn't sure Chisora was the right guy. Now he didn't really expand on that in too much detail, so I don't know why Chisora is not the right guy. Is it that Chisora's got other plans? Is it that Chisora doesn't want to fight? Is it that Chisora's too easy a fight? Is it that Chisora's too difficult a fight? Yeah, we can speculate that until the cows come home, but he didn't really allude to that. The only input I've had there is when I've seen interviews with Derek Chisora, he seems to want a lot of money, and he didn't seem overly keen on the fight with Anthony Joshua. He seemed to have other options on the table and not overly motivated to take that fight. He also seems to have got on well with Anthony Joshua in the past, and maybe they're loosely friends or something like that. But anyway, for whatever reason, it looks like the Chisora fight is less likely to happen next when Anthony Joshua comes back in April. Eddie Hearn has already suggested that fight will likely be on pay-per-view. So we've probably already got the first two pay-per-views for next year. Frampton Quigg being the first one, and Anthony Joshua versus whoever being the second one. Two names that Eddie Hearn mentioned as possible opponents for his next fight, for Joshua's next fight, are Robert Helenius and Johan Duhaupas. Now, let me start by saying I really like the Duhaupas fight for Joshua. And if I was managing AJ, Duhaupas is the opponent that I would look to make the fight with at this stage. Now I appreciate that it is possibly not the most entertaining fight in the world. Duhaupas is probably not the opponent that's going to get everyone's juices flowing. What I am saying, if I was in Eddie Hearn's position, I think it's a sensible fight to make. It's low risk. Duhaupas isn't a dynamite puncher. He's skillful enough without being exceptional. You'd expect Anthony Joshua to handle him. It's a good learning fight. You know, Duhaupas is probably more proven than anyone that Anthony Joshua's fought so far. I'm not saying he's a better fighter than Kevin Johnson or a better fighter than Dillian Whyte, but he's certainly more proven than Dillian Whyte. He maybe isn't as proven as Kevin Johnson, but you know, Duhaupas been in with some decent names, Tepper, Wilder, and one thing he's always been is very, very durable. I mean, you look at some of the shots he took from Wilder and how late he got in that fight, and you know, he stopped on his, it's like TKO, wasn't it, in the end? He's a very, very durable guy, and I think what Anthony Joshua needs at this stage is a guy who's going to give him rounds, that is the main area of concern for Anthony Joshua, is stamina for me. And fights like this represent really, really good learning fights. But learning fights in a situation where you'd expect him to come through, which is, what you want for a heavyweight prospect. You don't want to drown them too early. And Duhaupas is a decent operator. He's a step up. Yeah, the guy's slightly skillful as well. If you look back at that Wilder fight, although the Wilder fight was quite one-sided, from the perspective that Wilder was never actually going to lose the fight, he was winning every round. He did give Wilder some problems, he was very effective with the jab, he landed a lot on Wilder, and he hung around and made it awkward in there, and made Wilder look bad at times, even though on the whole it was a dominant performance from Deontay. But I think Duhaupas is a really, really good fight. I think it's good progression for Joshua. He might even be more skillful than Dillian Whyte, and again, he's got an excellent chin. There's also the option of favourable comparisons. I forget how many rounds the guy went with Wilder. It was a lot, though. It was 9, 10, 11, something like that. If Joshua got him out of there in 5 or 6, and as I say, I think it would be beneficial for AJ to get the rounds, but if he did get him out of there in 5 or 6, Wilder's known as a big, big puncher. It would be a very favourable comparison to make. And, this is a really, really good fight for Anthony Joshua. I like this fight or Marius Wok, although I understand he's recently failed a drug test again, so obviously that fight's out the window. Ustinov is another fight I liked, although Ustinov maybe one more fight away. You know, Ustinov's a pretty good operator. And the other fight being discussed is Robert Helenius. Now, I personally would take the Depar fight first and the Helenius fight second. I think Helenius is a tougher opponent for Johan Depar, for Anthony Joshua than Johan Depar. I mean, Helenius is a bigger name than Depar. He's more known to UK fans because of the Derek Chisora fight. He's also European title holder, which is a belt that a lot of people would like to see Anthony Joshua fight for and win. So the Helenius fight is a more attractive fight than Depar. But I personally would have the learning fight with Depar first. Yeah, I wouldn't expect Helenius to beat Joshua. You know, I'd expect Joshua to win that fight. I view Joshua as far more athletic, and he's just a more dynamic operator than Helenius. Yeah, Helenius does things good, but for me, he's quite a laboured operator. Yeah, he has power, but he doesn't have killer instinct. He doesn't have the speed of Joshua. He doesn't have the agility of Joshua. He's a bit of a ponderous, plodding fighter who coasts in fights a bit. And yeah, I would expect Anthony Joshua to have too much for Helenius. But nevertheless, Helenius is a big step up from what Joshua's faced in terms of quality. You know, Dillian Whyte may go on to be a very good fighter. Who knows? Yeah, and I'm not saying Dillian Whyte couldn't beat Helenius, but in terms of proven form, you know, Helenius is would be the top operator that Joshua's fought. And I think the two things that Helenius brings to the fight is real size. You know, he's a massive man, height and weight. Now, I know Joshua's fought Cornish before, who was taller than him, but, you know, Cornish was useless, you know, let's be honest. Whereas Helenius is like a decent operator and has that size, which makes him a very dangerous opponent. The second thing is he carries power, you know. He's not the most lethal finisher you're ever likely to see Helenius, but he does carry power, especially early in fights. And when somebody's that big, when somebody carries power, it always makes them a more risky opponent. You know, Johan Depar, I'm not saying he's a small guy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think Anthony Joshua is the bigger man in that fight, and I think Anthony Joshua has a huge edge in power. Robert Helenius, he might be bigger than Joshua, and I'm not saying Joshua doesn't have a power advantage over Helenius, but that gap is a lot closer. You know, that gap is a lot closer. Helenius has also been in with some big punchers before, and he's done sparring with Vladimir Klitschko extensively for the Tyson Fury fight. So, you know, Helenius is less likely to be intimidated, I guess. Not that Johan Depar will be intimidated, obviously. He's taken some tough fights. The other thing that's factoring is Helenius is also unbeaten. He's got that desire. You know, there's a lot of talk about Helenius. A lot of people think he could be a real top fighter. He was really highly regarded before he had his break. And now he's coming back and he's just won the European title in a one-sided performance. And, you know, people are starting to talk about him again. There's more sort of ambition from the Helenius side than some journeyman type opposition. Johan Depar, you know, he's had some heavy losses. He's come up short at world title level. Is he really going into this fight believing he can beat Anthony Joshua? Is he really going into this fight, you know, thinking that he's going to get the job done and go on again to world title honours? No. I mean, for me, that's why Helenius is a tougher fight. He's unbeaten, he's got that ambition, he's bigger and he hits harder. Yeah, I know it's a better fight than Depar. I know people won't like me saying Joshua should fight Depar because they'll say it's a boring fight and Johan Depar has no name. But it's a sensible learning fight. I mean, one of the big problems with having Joshua as a pay-per-view headliner so early is that once you start headlining pay-per-views and once you start owning that money and once the promoter is used to making that money off you, you can't really go back to just headlining free-to-air shows. Joshua versus Depar, is that a pay-per-view fight? Hell no. You know, hell no. You know, now Matchroom's lost Eubank Jr., you know, there's no chance of them getting a a massive fight for him on the card as well. It's tough, you know, because I think Eddie Hearn's got a conflict of interest to an extent. You know, I think Anthony Joshua should be held on to a little bit. He's a good fighter, but he's got a lot to work on and he's still young. I'd hold on to him at British title level for a little bit. You know, I'm not saying for ages, but for 2016, you know, I'd have him in those sort of fights. Try and get him rounds, try and work on defensive stuff. But it's hard to do that when you've got a fighter on pay-per-view. Very hard to do that, because if you're trying to charge 20 quid a fight and you're trying to sell 450,000 pay-per-views, the public's going to demand big fights. And Johan Duhaupas isn't a big fight. Johan Duhaupas is not the same character Dillian Whyte is. There's not the same backstory. He's not as dangerous as Dillian Whyte. You know, even if he's more skilled, he's not as dangerous, let's be honest. And for me, it was that bad blood that made that event such a success. So it's going to be tough for Eddie Hearn, you know, to choose an opponent who's less glamorous, like Johan Duhaupas. But in terms of Anthony Joshua's development, and in terms of strategically what the best move is, I like the Duhaupas fight. I think that's a good next move for Anthony Joshua. You know, Helenius, Chisora, they're both options for the end of the year. You know, I've heard other people talk about other British level opponents, Richard Towers perhaps. Who knows? David Price, you know, he comes back into the mix now. The Sauerlands have confirmed that he is going to return to the ring. He's not going to retire. Obviously, there's the news that both the guys have beaten him and failed drug tests subsequently. You know, can David Price get his mentality of an unbeaten fighter back? I doubt it, but stranger things have happened. That's still a big fight. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on Duhaupas. Let me know your thoughts on Helenius. Who would you like to see? Who do you think we will see? Many thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this, do give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any further vids that I'm going to do. Once again, Merry Christmas to everyone watching. Hope you all have a great day.